And with that, I will hand over to the lovely Rami. So I'll let him introduce himself because I'm sure he can do it far better than I can. But for now, he's birthday boy. So happy birthday, Rami.
Hi. Good morning. When I left, when I left the Netherlands 2 days ago, it was 2 days until my birthday, and then I landed and it was my birthday. I don't know where the 29th went, but it's pretty nice. Hi. As Liam said, my name is Rami Ismail, and today I want to have a little fireside chat with you all. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I'm on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, be on Twitter, maybe. Who here wants an introduction of who I am and what I do? That's okay. Let's do it. So, fuck it. My name is Rami Ismail. I'm one half of a Dutch independent studio named Vlaambeer. I do the marketing, the business, and the programming. I also drink a lot of Coca-Cola. This is JW. He's my co-founder. And JW is our designer. He draws in a lot of little booklets. And every year on my birthday, he makes a joke on Twitter that it's my 30th birthday, which it is not, and hasn't been for the past 6 years. So we make quite a few games. We're best known for games like Super Crate Box, Ridiculous Fishing, Gun Gods, Luftrausers, and most recently, Nuclear Throne. It all started about 6 years ago. Oh, this is the first talk I'm giving with this thing on. That's different. 6 years ago. And I was a student, just like you all. And then I did something really weird. I met this guy, and he was probably the most annoying person I ever met. So I started a company with him. And I did something that I'm not going to recommend you all. We dropped out. So don't do that. Bad idea. And it was a bad idea because we ate these for 8 months. They're instant noodles. They weren't discounted always, which should have said something about the quality of them. It came in 3 flavors: duck, chicken, beef. Don't eat the chicken and the beef ones. The ducks are pretty good. Anyway, we didn't have money. We didn't have money because we dropped out of school. We had nothing to really begin with. So if you're two people who don't know anything in life except for how to make games, how do you make money? Well, you make a game about fishing with machine guns. So that's what we did. The game was called Radical Fishing. It was a flash game, and it made us our first $10,001. And we used the $10,001 to turn this little prototype JW, my co-founder, had made into a real game. And this was Super Crate Box, and it came out in October 22nd of 2010. We really wanted October 20th because it will be 2010. But Super Meat Boy came out that day. And it turns out Super Crate Box and Super Meat Boy have like 10 letters in common. So, oops. We delayed the game by 2 days. But the thing is, Super Crate Box was like, it was freeware, so we still ate noodles. But it was a success. Like, it was freeware, and it spread everywhere. And at some point, even the Independent Games Festival picked up on it and nominated it for the 2011 awards. And suddenly people were paying attention to 2 kids who had no idea what they were doing. So somebody asked us to make a new game. So we made a game about gangster rap on Venus with guns. And then people started asking us to give talks, which, okay, I guess. And then this company from Texas came to us and they said, okay, we have this IP that we really like, and we want you to make a game for it. And we were like, okay, what's the IP? And they're like, it's Serious Sam. Now here's the thing, Serious Sam is a game that both myself and my co-founder really loved as kids, when I was like 14 or something. And so when they came to us, we were like, oh my God, we get to make a Serious Sam game. But on the other hand, they were a publisher. And to us, publisher meant that they were a bunch of dudes in suits who had no idea about video games, and all they wanted was money. So we said, no, but we couldn't say no, because 14-year-old me was like, oh, come on, it's Serious Sam. So we thought of a compromise, and it was really smart. We said, what if we make the worst pitch ever? Just the worst pitch, right? And then they'll say no, and then we're good. So we thought, okay, what's Serious Sam? It's this game about running around, shooting, running backwards, screaming enemies coming at you. What if we make a turn-based RPG? So we emailed it to them, and then we got an email with, yeah, sure, make it. So don't bluff in pitches. Anyway, that game did really well as well. And then we decided that we would do conferences. So we printed our own T-shirts. If you are an independent studio, first thing you do, print your own T-shirts. Seriously, it's worth it. It's the greatest thing, wearing your own logo. It's kind of weird and oddly narcissistic, but it's really cool as well. This is the first conference we ever did. I just went to a merchandise company and I said, like, listen, the one thing I noticed about conferences is every good company has merch. Can you make us all the merch? They're like, can you pay? We're like, not yet. They're like, okay, how about this? We take a deal, we make the stuff, and then we take all the profit. And we're like, deal. So that's what they did. And they actually made a really good profit, which, cool for them. Anyway, we decided we'd step it up, and we take that fishing game we made, and we make an iOS version of it. And it was called Ridiculous Fishing, and it's probably the game we're best known for. It's, again, a game about fishing on machine guns, but this time we said instead of for Flash, which what the original game was, we're going to make it for mobile. And we are going to make the single best mobile game ever made. So we set off, we got a really good team together, Zach Gage, a programmer from New York, Greg Woolwan, and he's like a guaranteed Apple Design Award, I think, and he created the art for the game. And then Eirik Surke from Norway, who did the music. And everything was going really well, and then 6 months in, right? 6 months in, we got news that a studio in San Francisco thought our idea was really good, and they were just going to steal it. So they cloned Ridiculous Fishing, and they released it as Ninja Fishing. And it did really well, made $1 million real quick. Super well reviewed, sitting at like an 8.7 on Metacritic. People loved the game. So we were really sad, because that was our game. And we almost quit, because we weren't making money. I got pretty depressed. JW got pretty depressed. Every time we'd open our computer, we'd get a headache, which was weird, because I need my computer to make money and to make games. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I'd been making games since I was 6, and it wouldn't work. Anyway, a bunch of people emailed us, and they were like, hey, folks, listen, don't quit making games because I like your games. So we were like, okay. So we thought, what can we do? What can we do to turn this into something good? And we were like, we know, we're going to email the New York Times, who then wrote a giant article about how cloning is a real problem. And then GDC asked for a talk about it, and then a whole bunch of stuff happened, and then we were back making games. We were really angry still, so while we were working on Ridiculous Fishing, we thought, let's make a really angry game. So I made a game about airplanes and guns. There's a lot of guns in our games. How do you make a fishing game with guns? Huh. Anyway, and then Ridiculous Fishing came out, and it won Game of the Year. 2013, Apple decided it was the best game of the year, won an Apple Design Award. We got flown to Hollywood for some movie awards. I have no idea I don't even remember what they were named. But like one of the old James Bonds, the one that was only in one movie, he was there. He gave me a back rub. It was weird. Anyway, Hollywood, right. Anyway, then we started working on our new game, and the new game was called Nuclear Throne. It came out in December. We worked on it for 2.5 years. We live streamed all of the development on Twitch, so you could watch us make the game, which was both great and horrifying. We would tell people like, oh, yeah, so we're going to add a new weapon, and we'd add a new weapon to the game, and then we'd shoot it for the first time, right, and the bullet would go straight through walls because we hadn't programmed collision yet, and then the audience would be like, hey, that bullet went through a wall. We're like, yeah, we know, we haven't programmed collision yet. They're like, you have to program that? Now I get why games take 2 years. Anyway, so that's me. Is there anybody who has questions? No? So here's the thing. Normally when you do a talk, right, you do a talk, and then at the end of it, you do a Q&A. Now, I haven't been to Australia in a while. I don't know what Australian students are thinking about. So we're going to do it the other way around. I want you to ask me questions, and I will answer them as honestly and as completely as possible. I don't really care what the question is. Please don't ask about, stuff that has nothing to do with the games industry, unless you really want to. But just go. Ask me questions. Can you turn on the light in the hall, maybe? A little bit, not entirely. I don't want to be blind in like 3 seconds.
Will you do something differently this time around?
For this game? Would I do something differently for this game? Yes. So every game we've made, we've learned a lot. For some games, it was business related. So I learned for Dinosaur Zookeeper that if you negotiate, set a higher number than you think is reasonable. So we made our first game for $10,000, right? Then we were going to make a second Flash game for Cartoon Network. They have a lot of money. So we said, we're going to ask for 3 times as much. We asked for 30,000. So we emailed Cartoon Network with 30,000. They were like, yep. Done. Now, if that isn't the worst negotiation you've ever heard, you should tell me that story, because it's probably a really good story. But then for Nuclear Throne, for Lufthouses, actually, we learned that we still were very prone to working too hard and like just not sleeping and being proud of that. And we were like, okay, we need to stop doing that, because we started noticing that it started annoying us in other developers. You look at another developer and they're like, yeah, we worked on the game for years and we barely slept. I've been burned out all the time. And I'm like, that's not something to be proud of. Don't say that. Why would you say that? That's a horrible idea. And then I realized that I was still doing it, and I was like, oh, right, got to quit that. For Ridiculous Fishing, that a lot of game development is emotional energy, right? You're putting your work and your heart into this thing, and if you lose that love or that connection to it, it's hard to do good work. It's hard to do any work at all. Like I said, I opened my computer, I had a headache. We had worked for 3 years straight without ever taking a break, and then those 3 years were great, because the first part of the intro, right, it's all good stories. It's all stuff where we didn't expect stuff to work out, and it did, and it was great, and it was awesome. And the first time something came and slapped us in the face, we just broke, because we hadn't been taking care of ourselves. And for Nuclear Throne, the 2.5 years is really long. That's a really long project. Scope small, and then keep track of your production. And don't tell Sony that you will launch in 3 months if you still have 6 months of work. That's a pro tip. Also, if you think you have 3 months of work left and Sony says launch in 3 months, you actually mean you have 6 months of work left. So.
What are some of your tips for living on no money while you were developing games?
All right, so here's the thing. Living on no money doesn't exist, right? There's no such thing. Whatever you do, you're going to need money. So when I started Vlambeer, I had a job. I sold computers. It's actually where I learned to negotiate. It's a really funny thing. I had no idea how to negotiate, and then I had to sell $2,000 computers to like people who wanted the $600 one. You get really good at negotiating, apparently. But I needed money, so I had a job. And then on the side, I would make as little expense as possible, and then use all the money I had to go to conferences. Right? Anything I had was just conferences, and it was the biggest ones I could find. Like GDC Europe was right around the corner, but GDC San Francisco was way bigger. So I said, you know what? Skip Europe, put all of my money into San Francisco, go to San Francisco. And then that network helped us kind of pull out of that, right? Because eventually, good work is only worth so much. Like, good work is half of the equation. The other work is networking. The other work is making sure that people know about your good work. Because if you make the best game ever and nobody has ever heard of it, it won't do anything. So, no, have an income. Make sure that you can make games without the constant worry of how do I feed myself at the end of this day, because that's actually quite exhausting, right? Like being worried about money is not, people always think of that as like, oh, it's just a thing you do. Like it's mentally exhausting, it's a puzzle, right? It's like we would have 3 noodles and we would fight over the third one because it would come with duck, chicken, and beef. And I wanted the duck one, but he wanted the duck one. So we would like say like, okay, I'll get the chicken and the, like it's basically how it went like all the time. It's like, well, okay, let's puzzle this way through. So the notion of like the starving artist is a very romanticized, I would almost say, thing. But like, if you can avoid it, please do. If you can experiment while you're a student, use that time, right? When you don't 100% have to worry about all that stuff. I don't know how that works in Australia, but I'm assuming you're mostly busy with school at that point. But yeah, no. If you want to spend as little money as possible, spend the money you have on stuff that will improve your network and your software. Or, you know, if you're really bored, just fuck that, pirate it. I don't care. Honestly, I pirated Photoshop until Flambeer started. Like, when we made our first $10,000, I was like, okay, I guess I should buy Photoshop now. It got me this far. But seriously, don't worry. Like, as soon as you go commercial, get your shit in order. Until you go commercial, just get your craft in order. Shit, pirate my games if you want to. I don't care.
Hey, Rami.
Yeah.
Yep, this way.
Hi.
Hey. I was just wondering how all your involvement in Press Kit kind of fell into the timeline and I guess what led you to that and kind of what was your experience in building out that product?
All right, so Press Kit is this thing I made. It's a free toolkit that allows developers to make press kits. Does everybody know what a press kit is? Does somebody not know what a press kit is? Okay, good. So a press kit is effectively if you make a commercial game, what you do is you make something that allows the press to get a full overview of what the game is and the assets they need to write an article or make a video about it. So it usually includes some screenshots, a trailer, some B-roll, and for those of you who don't know what B-roll is, it's just random gameplay footage that's a bit longer. Like it's not a snappy cut of like the best shots. It's just here's 20 seconds of gameplay, right? So you can put that in your videos. And you put all of that together with like a description and a bunch of other stuff so that if the press wants to write about your game, they don't have to Google image search your game and then get like a 40-year-old screenshot of your work in progress art, right? So the idea was that I hated making press kits because it's a ton of work. So I thought, I'm a programmer. I can automate this. So I did, and I wrote this framework that would allow you to really quickly make a press kit. And then I asked a friend of mine, a fellow developer, asked him, what do you think of this? And he's like, can I have it? And I was like, the code is horrible. And he was like, no, I want it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I rewrote a whole bunch of the code and then released it as a public thing for free. And I always thought when I went into the games industry that, you know, games would be the legacy that you have, and it turns out that for me it's Press Kit at the moment. It's by far my most used thing, and the thing I'm best known for, which is, okay, cool, I made Press Kit. But yeah, it was a complete accident. Again, I just made a thing, asked for feedback, and then things happened. Hi.
I was just wondering what the sort of biggest or most useful lessons you've learned from Twitch streaming your game dev process.
So big tips, have a schedule. Basically all of these all of the tips for Twitch streaming apply to Twitch streaming in general, not just game development, but have a schedule so that people know when to tune in. Be proactive in telling people to subscribe and follow. You know how you always like make jokes about YouTubers being like, subscribe and follow? You know why they do it? Because it fucking works. That's why they do it. Like, of course that's why they do it. They're not just for fun adding that stuff into their video. It works. That's why they do it. So do that. Like, ask if you want people to buy your game. Don't just say like, my game is available. No, say like, my game is available. You can buy it now, right? It's a small difference, but it makes a whole lot of difference. Like a call to action really works. And then if you do stream, make it a stream that's longer than an hour. Twitch actually recommends to stream for like three hours-ish. So do that. And the final thing is get an okay setup, good webcam. Like $100 will get you a good webcam. $100 will get you a good microphone. But like good quality streams are a huge, huge difference. And then really all I hate when I say all you have to do, but what you have to do is you have to figure out what your identity is and the part of your identity that you want to show the Twitch stream, and then be that. Like, don't make too much of an act, because it turns out keeping an act up forever is really hard, and keeping an act up while you're programming or making art is even harder. So be you. Just figure out which side of you want to show. Don't be too much you. This is actually a pro tip for social media. Be yourself on social media, but don't be yourself on social media. Like, put like a slightly shielded version of you on social media, because there's a lot of assholes on social media. And if you put like your full 100% vulnerable version of you on Twitter, it hurts. So don't. Be you, but pick what you show. Good. I'll take one more. Okay. I'll take two more. Nice.
Hi, Rami. First off, happy birthday and congratulations on your engagement.
Thank you.
My question is, I was wondering if you could start your game dev career again, what would you do differently this time in a 2016, 2017 kind of context?
That's a good question. I will answer that one later. Is that okay? All right. Good. Yours? Oh, that's really simple. Me and JW, how do we balance our life and workflow? So here's the good news is me and JW really don't like each other. Like, actually genuine. Like, people always ask me, like, is that true? And it's true. Like, we have nothing in common. We just like working with each other. So back in the days, we didn't balance work and life. Our life was work, and that was it. And like I said, we were proud of that. And then about 3 years ago, when Ridiculous Fishing got cloned, we realized that that was a really bad idea. So we stopped doing that. Now what we do is we have sort of an understanding that neither of us does like 100% full-time work on Flambeer, which doesn't mean we don't put in hours. Like, we work like a week, like a work week, but we don't expect each other to do more than that. And if either of us needs a break, we just give each other a break. Like, JW is traveling around the world right now. He's like, he keeps moving play. He basically said he wanted a year in like spring or summer, so he's been moving between the hemispheres. Like, as soon as it turns fall in one hemisphere, he just hops over to the other one. I have no idea where he is at the moment. But every now and then he'll say like, oh yeah, I did 2 days of work, here's a new thing that you should look at. And then I look at it and I just do the accountancy and the business and the patching and all that for our other games. But we really got much better at like listening to our own like mental and physical health. So basically we don't work more than we should. Not even have to, just should. If we have to work more than we should, we just don't do that work. Sounds silly, but it turns out there's a lot of work you're doing that is probably superfluous, and you don't really have to spend as much time on that. So, thanks for asking questions. For those of you that did, for those of you that didn't, why didn't you ask questions? There's a lot. For those of you who tried to ask a question, well done. For those of you who didn't, why not? Now, I know that asking questions on the stage, I don't need this chair anymore. Screw this chair. Asking questions is hard. Asking good questions is much harder. I was actually really impressed by the questions, which is cool. Because I get a lot of bad questions, right? A lot of really bad questions. And what I wanted to talk about today was bad questions. And you've all seen this, right? It's very inspirational. It's also not true. There's totally such a thing as bad questions. Like, who believes this? No such thing as bad games, just bad players. Of course this isn't true. Like, of course, there's bad questions. The reason people say stuff like this is to make people feel comfortable asking questions, right? Now, here's the thing. All of you ask bad questions. all the time. I ask bad questions all the time. Turns out that good questions are way harder than good answers. I hate having, this is like a little detour, I hate having slides with a scientist in my presentation because it's pretentious as hell. So here's Einstein. The thing is, I couldn't get around this slide because he said probably the smartest thing I've ever read about a question. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, right, and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes trying to figure out the right question. Because I believe if I had the right question, it would take me only 5 minutes to find the answer, right? Now that's how important questions are. Now, I'm on this stage, right? I've made games for 6 years, I travel around the world, I've launched games on every platform. There's a whole bunch of shit you could have asked me about. You could have asked me how my sales figures are. I told you I would answer anything. You could ask me about certification, you could ask me about my contacts. You could ask me who to email at Polygon. You could ask me about contracts. You could ask me about launch priority, which order do I launch games. You could have asked me about discoverability, about public speaking, about release management. There's a lot of things you could have asked me about, right? And like I said, I was actually really impressed by the questions that I was asked. If you grab me later during the day and you have a question, just feel free to ask, right? Like I'm here for you all to talk. I learn as much from this as you all do. Now here's the thing, if you're gonna ask me questions, if you're gonna ask anybody questions, there's 5 types of questions you should not ask, right? Now this is number 1. This is one of the most common ones I get. It's just, you have a question and the answer is just on Google. So before you ask a question, just Google it, right? Just see if that answer exists on the internet. Not all questions have that. You've got this one. You got that one. This one. This one. And then for Q&As, there's another one that we'll talk about in a second. But basically, they're very simple. You've got the one that you should have Googled, and then the second one is, I very often get a question that goes somewhat like, so on this game we did, we launched it, what order would you launch it in? What platforms? And I'd be like, well, I would probably launch console, PC, mobile. They're like, yeah, that's what we did, and it didn't work. I'm like, yeah, but the question there isn't necessarily to ask me what my launch priority was. It was a way to get somebody with authority or perceived authority to confirm their feelings, right? To confirm that they made a choice that was right. Now the thing is, that doesn't work because I'm guessing as much as you are, right? It's not as if 6 years of experience means that I'm like a sage that has all the answers or an oracle that sits on a mountain and then like answers come. Like I have no fucking clue. When somebody asked me, do you want to launch on PlayStation first? I was like, does that sound smart? Yeah. I think it does. When you set a price for a game, you know what price setting is? It's black magic. It has no fucking idea. They're like, hey, how much should this game cost? 12? Nah, that sounds too much. 9? Nah, too little. 11.99? That's 1 cent less than 12. Yeah, but it sounds better. Yeah, 11.99 then, right? The 3 steps to success, or any variation like the 4 steps to success, or the 5 steps to success. Questions that I can only answer in hindsight are interesting because that's to answer your question as well. The thing is, the stuff I learned was very useful when it was happening to me. So if you ask me how to start a game studio, you know what my honest answer is? Make a Flash game. Because that's how I did it. You know what that is? Horrible fucking advice. Because that worked in 2010 when I started and there was a Flash market. 2016, probably don't do that. You know, if people ask me how do we get the media attention, I would say like, well, we just emailed the press. Because that's what we did in 2010. There were like 12 indie studios. Like, That worked. Nowadays, you're not just competing with the indie studios that are starting at the same time as you. You're competing with everybody. You're competing with me. Right? That's rough. Like, I didn't have to compete with me 6 years ago. I wouldn't have liked that. The guy that's constantly on airplanes, going to every conference, I don't want to beat that network. That seems like a bad idea. But that's the thing, like, I can give you a lot of information about what I did and why I did it. The problem is that all of that information to you directly as a concrete answer is not useful. What is useful to you is trying to figure out what the reasoning behind it was. Why did I do that? Why did Studio X do that? Why did Capybara do that? Why did Team Meat do that? Why did whoever do that? Like, why did people make the choice they did? And what can I learn from that? Every answer you get is a perspective. And then finally, that final one, the answer does not apply to me, you, that's basically kind of the same thing. You can ask me what I would do on Twitch for my new game. That question is the answer is utterly useless to you. Because I can do that because we're Vlambeer. If I launch a new game and I announce it on Twitter 2 days before we launch, hell, it'll work. If you do that, it won't. It's just the way it is, right? Like, you can ask me, what would you do? Well, I would do things that work for me. Now, here's the thing. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You know what? I'll talk about this in a bit. Oh yeah, and then my favorite Q&A one is this one. It's just people talking about themselves and they disguise it as a question. Don't do that. Don't ever be that person. So asking good questions. Now, here's the thing. Why is questions, why am I spending this, how much time do I have? I took off my watch. I have no idea. All right. Okay, 20 minutes, good. So why I'm spending this time on questions? Does anybody know? Questions are by far the most important thing that we do. More than anything else. Doesn't matter what discipline in this industry you are. You're a programmer? Great. Are you a good programmer? Great. Can you ask the right questions? If not, then you're not a good programmer. If you're an artist, asking questions, most important thing you do. You're a producer, team manager, designer, doesn't matter. Questions are at the core of what we do. Why do I make this choice? What is my goal? When does it have to be done? How am I going to do this? With who am I going to do this? And exploring those questions is difficult. Like I said, answering questions is a lot easier than asking them. But a lack of good questions will kill your studio. A lack of good questions will kill your career. Asking the right questions is so, so important. So there's a lot of ways to ask questions. And you can basically take two directions. Why did I have a duplicate slide? Did you do that? At the start of today, Liam accidentally deleted half of this presentation by putting something on the delete button. I guess I just double put this back in. It's fine, it's fine. That's a good birthday gift. So here, when you ask a question, there's basically three things you can do. You could try to add a perspective to a conversation. You could try to get an answer to the actual question, which is also something you can do. Or you can find new avenues to explore. Before you ask a question, figure out what you're trying to do. Right? Before you ask a question, figure out what your goal is. And very often when I ask people why, they give me an answer. And you know that really fun, super annoying game when you're a kid? Like, why do you make games? Somebody tell me. Can't stop. Why? Why? Remember that game? Thank you. Most important thing you can ever learn is asking that. Just ask yourself until you're really fucking annoyed at yourself. Just keep, why do you make games? Why do you make games? Do you know why you make games? It's fun? Why is it fun? It's fun is not the answer. It's fun is an answer, but it's not the real answer. To express yourself. Why do you want to express yourself? A legacy. A communication. Why games? So theater? Why not theater? What? Sorry? What about interactive theater? We could go for hours. But that's the thing. Why is actually much harder. And the thing with answering questions is that a lot of times people will not actually answer the question. They will give an answer that will make you stop asking. Right? Now here's the thing. If you are in a professional context and you're working and you've agreed that you want to ask each other the best questions and make the best game, keep asking until you have the answer you need. Keep helping people, keep guiding people to an answer. But don't just give up. Like, when does this have to be done? 2 weeks. Right? Is that actually our deadline, or because the calendar set 3? Yeah, no, 2 weeks. It's like, that's the kind of conversation I hear all the time. I do this exercise with students that I really love. I'm a horrible teacher. Don't make me teach at your school. I tell them, okay, you get 2 days to make a game. You can ask me any question for 20 minutes. Any question. Let's do a really quick version of this. Ask me questions. I want you to make the game I have in my head. If you've seen some of my other talks, you might recognize the exercise. Then don't play along for now. Okay. Okay. Ask me questions. You have 20 minutes to ask me any question about this game I want you to make in 2 days. I could answer that, but then your 20 minutes are over. It's a platformer.
What are you hoping to get out of the game?
What?
What are you hoping to get out of playing the game?
I want players to have a good time and master a skill. Ooh, there's the game I'm thinking of is actually kind of old. Yeah. Single player? Sorry? Jumping. People with consoles? Sorry? Oh, Jesus. There's a jump sound. There's a coin sound. No. Here's the thing. Most of you probably thought Super Mario Brothers, didn't you? Yeah. No. Here's the thing. Thanks so much for asking. These answers could have been 100 fucking games, right? I basically gave no answer to any of your questions. I dodged every single one, but it sounded convincing. It sounded like I was answering your questions. What is your mechanic? It's a platformer? That's not a mechanic, right? What are you out of? I just said coins, and everybody thought Super Mario Bros. You know how many games have coins? There's a lot of games with coins, a lot of platformers. Anyway, I love this exercise because I get to fail all the students, and I'm an ass. Everybody makes Super Mario Bros., and I always want Mario 64. Very enjoyable. So I'm gonna make this fast. Don't worry. So the first thing you want to ask yourself: what do I want to learn, and why are you asking this person? So if you're asking me, what do you want out of it? Do you need an expert opinion? Do you need authority? Why are you asking me? Are you asking your peers? Because if you're asking how to start a game studio, don't ask me. Ask each other. Ask each other because you're all in the same situation. I have no idea what it's like starting in 2016. Never done it. I have really good advice about starting in 2010, like I said. But like, if you want to have advice about starting now, ask people that started last year. Do you know any people that started a game studio last year? Probably do, right? Sorry? They're speaking next. Sorry. But then ask them, not me, right? If you need somebody with like 6 years of Steam sales history, ask me, not them, because they started last year, right? So that's kind of the way that works. Is like think about what you're asking, why you're asking, and why you're asking that person. And then If you ask questions, try to avoid some very basic bad questions, which is questions that are answered with yes or no. If you want to learn something, yes or no questions are really bad. Does the game have coins? Yes. What does this teach you beyond that the game has coins? What do the coins do? What are they for? Like, try to ask questions that force the other person to answer more in depth. So instead of is there, what does? Instead of what, why? Now, if somebody gives an answer, try and be reactive to that answer. There's nothing more annoying than being like, does the game have coins? Yes. Are there cars? What? Ask about the coins. I just told you about the coins. Ask about them, right? And depending on the other person, you might want to ask multiple questions at once. Are there coins? And if yes, what do they do? And for other people, it might be better to ask one question and then follow up later, right? In general, you want to move from as generic as possible to as specific as possible, right? And then if you hit a certain specific point, go back to the generic point. And if you follow up on a question, try use something from that previous answer. Just as a courtesy, as something nice, as a flow for the conversation. Don't forget, if you want to know something specific, you can guide the other person to talk about that without immediately forcing it on them, right? It's very valuable knowing the mental route somebody takes to a certain conversation because it helps you figure out why they're answering a question in a certain way. It also teaches them how you're thinking, by the way, which is also very valuable, right? Like if you just immediately hop to directly what you want to talk about, you learn a lot less about the context than if you have a conversation that flows there. Silence is great. I love it. I don't know. They actually did research the other day. Kids didn't say like, before like 1960 or something. That's a new thing. Really weird. But people are very uncomfortable with silence. People are very uncomfortable with silence as an answer to a question. Here's the thing. Somebody asks you a question, it's hard. Just shut up. Think. You don't have to answer immediately. Nobody's going to be like, hey, why do you make games? I'm not going to answer that immediately. Come on, that's like a core question about my identity and why I do what I do and why I live my life the way I do. I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, it's this, right? No, that's a good question. Give it time. Give it time. Think about it. Silence is not a weakness. And as long as you see silence as a weakness, as long as you see silence as a failure to answer a question, you're not going to give good answers. You're not going to ask good questions. Be comfortable with silence. Give people time to think. For fun, try and replace and like in the way you speak, just for fun. Just try, see if you can do it, if that makes you feel like inherently uncomfortable. Because silence is scary. We've been taught that silence is bad. Like, try and unlearn it. And if somebody is silent, you don't have to help them, right? If somebody is silent, if you're asking a question and somebody is silent, don't just go and fill it in for them. You know how many times I hear that when somebody asks a question and the other person doesn't immediately respond and then the person who asked the question answers it? What the hell is that? If you know the answer, don't ask it. What is this? Like, if people are silent, assume that they need some time to think. And sure, if it takes a very long time, ask if they're okay, right? No, seriously, that's not to laugh about. Seriously, ask if they're okay. Ask if they're okay. Learn to rephrase as well. If you're not getting the answer, like maybe the question was bad, maybe you miscommunicated. Some people want indirect questions. Some people want really direct questions. Some people want you to ask, can you do this instead of tell me about, right? Like people are different. If you are asking a question and somebody doesn't answer, check if you're using jargon. You know what we're really good at in this industry? Jargon. You want to have a fun exercise? If you're ever in like a cab or something, try and explain to the cab driver what you do without ever using the word game. Just for fun. And don't refer to any game. Try to have a conversation with each other where you both assume you know nothing about video games. Just see how much fun it is. It's hard, but if you want to ask questions, learn to avoid jargon. And you know, in most cases you can use jargon, but when I say platformer, you don't know whether I mean 2D or 3D. You don't mean if I mean conventional or non-conventional. You don't know anything except for a genre, and the problem with jargon is that it creates assumptions, and assumptions are bad. And if you're going to ask a question, be as neutral as possible in the question you're asking. Now the final thing, why is this 4 again? You really fucked this up, Liam. This presentation is gone. So, I read a really interesting article the other day, and this is pretty much my final slide. Google. You all know Google, right? Do I need to do an intro for Google? No. It's a good friend of mine, Google. No, Google was looking for what makes a team successful. What is it? What is the secret mix of people and attitudes and perspectives that you need to make a team optimal, to make it efficient? And you know what they wrote in their article? The end of their research? They literally said we were wrong. It has nothing to do with the people. The only thing that's important is that they have a safe environment, and that they are comfortable, and that they are happy. Now this is not just some random thing that somebody said. No, this is backed by Google, and they are basing their company structure on this. Have a safe environment. And they basically put this chart there. I would actually recommend, just because I don't have time to fully go through all of this, but basically go search for that research. I don't want to waste too much of your talk's time. But the base said that at the top of everything is psychological safety. Is the feeling that you can be at ease, that you won't get judged, that you won't get shunned, that you won't get laughed at for a suggestion, for a thought. And in fact, I spend a lot of time on airplanes. That kind of research, is there anybody here scared of flying? Sorry, maybe close your eyes and ears. In 1977, there was this giant runway collision. 2 Boeing 747s. It was actually a KLM, which is the Dutch airliner, which I fly most often. And just 2 airplanes ran into each other in a runway. And the weirdest thing is the co-pilot of the KLM airplane had mentioned it 3 or 4 times to the pilot that they didn't have clearance for takeoff yet. But the pilot was in a hurry and didn't understand what the co-pilot was saying, right? And in response to that, the Airline Association basically created something called cockpit resource management. And they created a way to talk to each other. They established a formal way of talking that was safe, that felt safe, that allowed people to have objections to people that are higher in the hierarchy, to people that are their boss. That saves lives, right? It saves lives in airplanes, in hospitals. They use it everywhere nowadays. But it's also a really good lesson. Communication is fallible. Words are fallible. The way we communicate is inherently fallible because we're using these abstract, weird things called words to communicate really difficult concepts. Right? I could say perspective. I don't think it means the same to you it does to me. I could say sun, like ball of lava in the sky. You know what I think of? Egypt, because I'm half Egyptian. That's where I would go in my summers. Doesn't mean the same to you? I would assume if you're a researcher that studied the sun, you're probably not thinking of Egypt when I talk about the sun, right? Like, we're using this inherently fallible way of communicating, so make sure that you're communicating well. So here's what the FAA did, and then feel free to figure out your own thing to deal with that. Address the individual. If you're asking a question, state clearly who you're asking it from. There's 2 reasons for that. A, so the person knows you're asking them. B, so that everybody else shuts the fuck up, right? So if you want somebody specific to answer a question, just ask that person. If you're trying to ask an art question from an artist and your programmer starts talking, I'm not going to say punch them. I'm going to say tell them to shut up. So address the individual and then state a concern. What are you asked? Why are you worried about this? What is your concern? Analyze the situation in a short sentence or maybe two short sentences, but try to own your emotions about it a little bit. Like just try and give like a neutral assessment of the situation. And then state a solution and your reasons for that solution. Why do you think this would be a solution? And then instead of letting it sit there, ask for buy-in. Actively ask the other person to agree or disagree. Give them the space to agree or disagree without sounding like they're being jerks, without sounding like they're being awful. So if you have this great idea and you just drop the great idea and the other person goes like, nah, I don't see it. That's a pretty scary thing to say. If they're your boss, that's easier for them. If it's the other way around, your boss has an idea and it's a horrible idea, it would be nice to be able to say no, right? It'd be like, no, really, honestly, I don't think this is a good idea. You're going to go a place in the industry and you will find yourself at times with people that work with you and you are higher in the hierarchy. Make sure you respect that and that you acknowledge that you are in that position and ask for buy-in. Good. I hope that was some good pointers about questions. I would love to do more questions, but I think Liam would tell me to get off stage.
Yeah, a little bit, maybe.
That's good. If you have any questions, I'll be around throughout the day. Feel free to ask me any question. Feel free to ask the other speakers any question. Ask them a lot of questions. Ask them really hard questions. Do me a favor. Not like make it really difficult, but like kind of go for it. Okay. Thanks so much. Make some games.
Thanks so much.